we have had consultants work on a Town of Berlin self-evaluation and transition plan through a grant, an ADA grant that we received through the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, thanks to the help of Connor Robichaud. And we have the consultants who worked on the plan here today with us, and they're going to go through the executive summary of the plan, let us know what they found, what their recommendations are, and where we go from here. So I'm going to hand the floor now to Connor Robichaud of CMRPC, Mike Kennedy, and Jim Mazik, who are the contracted consultants on this project. Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, Margaret. First, I just want to say thanks for having us. We got this grant December of this year and had 6 months to complete it, which is usually a really tight timeline, never mind COVID being a part of it. So big thank you to the town for being so flexible and coordinating assessment visits and doing all the surveys that we needed. That was great, and we got it done just under the wire here. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Mike. Do you want to get us started, or Jim, do you want to get us started with the, I think you're muted.
Okay, this is Mike. I'd be glad to start because
hey Mike, if you don't mind, what I'd like to do is do a quick general overview, real brief, then turn it over to you to do the self-eval discussion piece, and then we go back into the transition plan. Would that work?
Sure thing. So I'll put myself on mute and take it away, Jim.
Okay. So again, I think some of the department heads, you would have heard some of this spiel months ago. The American Disability Act actually signed into law in July 26 of 1990 by President George H. Bush. And what ADA is actually, it's a civil rights legislation, civil rights law. And it's intended to have equal access to programs and services to all, and more importantly, just to provide civil rights, guaranteed civil rights to those persons with mental and physical impairments. Now, there are 5 titles under the ADA. The ones that are specific to you as a municipality is Title I, which deals with employment, and that in Title II, which is state and local governments. Now, so ADA is, although I left my book upstairs.
Excuse me, Jim, could you please speak into your microphone a little
Sure.
closer, please? I'm having a hard time hearing. Thanks.
Okay, is that good?
That'll work. Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
So in Massachusetts, there's also a state building code which deals with accessibility. The difference between ADA and 521 CMR, which is specialized section state building code, is that, again, ADA is based upon civil rights. It does have standards and specifications, but it deals with program access. So it's not always dealt with as a physical built construction alternative. So 521 CMR at the state level is solely triggered by construction, new construction or an addition renovation. And depending upon the value of the work, the value of the building, would depend upon what needs to be done. So if you never did any work on a building, unless someone filed a complaint of something, really, you're not under 521 CMR, you're not required to make those improvements at the present time. ADA, again, is governed a little bit differently, and the intent is that municipalities try to address accommodations as they can without being a burden on their jurisdiction. That's the basis for creating these plans. You look at your policies, your procedures, you make changes as they are required, and then you put in effect a plan of how to deal with the physical limitations with your properties, and you do that over time. So the plan itself is based on the self-evaluation piece, which I'll turn over to Mike in a second to talk about. And we looked at the very areas that required, and we also look at whether you have a commission on disabilities under the state requirements. We have recommendations and policies and procedures. And then we also looked at the actual transition plan the assessment into those buildings. And when we do that, we basically look at both 521 CMR and then the ADA 2010 standards, current. So the current standards, we provide a very detailed description of what is in non-compliance. We provide the code citations about the state level and federal level, that's in your report, and very specific what would be required to then remediate that issue. And then we try to put in place a recommendation on, well, what priority is it? How feasible is it? Time frame, and then a cost estimate. So in some areas we look at, and this would be mostly to police, fire, and DPW highway. And there are areas which are limited to primarily the employees, and in most cases with those three departments, those staff need to meet certain physical requirements to conduct their positions, their work requirements. So for example, if it was solely just the firefighters or DPW, and there was a let's say a kitchenette or a locker facility used solely by them. So we typically address that as a reasonable accommodation, because currently, right now, those folks would have to meet certain physical standards to maintain their positions, and they're really not open to the public elsewhere. So we typically write in there that unless things change, unless you have civilian personnel, public access to those areas, those would only be dealt with as a reasonable accommodation. So and you see where we've addressed that in police, fire, and in some regard DPW. If it's an open area, if there's a bathroom off a public meeting space, or the office into the police or fire, no, there has to be full compliance. So in a nutshell, that's the basis of the report, the outline. Mike spent the bulk of the work on the self-eval piece. So I turn over to you, Mike. Now you want to talk a little bit about the self-eval, some of the policies, procedures, some of the things that you identified and found lacking or that were in compliance.
Sure, thanks, Jim. First of all, can everybody hear me okay? All right. Hearing no one saying no, I will proceed. First of all, I just, on behalf of Center for Living and Working, or CLW, in partnership with Jim Nasick and Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, I just want to thank the town of Berlin for choosing us, to conduct your ADA self-evaluation transition plan. And I agree with Connor that staff at the town of Berlin have been very helpful, very approachable, and were very good during this process. Because this was all new to us too. Doing these evaluations right smack in the middle of the COVID pandemic. So, so as you recall, we had sent out surveys for all department heads and commission chairs and other town officials to fill out. It was a 6-page form, and using the results from those surveys, along with just our assessments of our transition plans while we actually went to the actual site, the results were being shared in the actual self-evaluation piece. So it's all different pieces that the self-evaluation talks about. So I'll start with the Commission on Disability. The just from looking on the website, online, looking through Mass Office on Disability website, it appears as though the Commission on Disability is no longer active. So our recommendations there really would be to reestablish it and appoint a minimum of 5 members to serve on the board. And once in place, this commission should actively post information about the commission, its meetings, and town disability-related policies on the website. Especially now that the town of Berlin has a ADA plan in place, this is really where the Disability Commission can come in. Like I believe the very last publication in Mass Office on Disability lists, Margaret as the Commission on Disability chair. So, and knowing that, Margaret's the town administrator, well, that was our biggest hint that it's no longer active. ADA coordinator, there's at least 2 different places that's made known in on your website. So the only recommendation there is just to make it even easier to locate in the Board of Selectmen page. So, but yeah, I mean, in that case, you're already doing now well. Public notices. The self-evaluation survey responses to the question, is the public informed that their programs are prepared to make reasonable accommodations? Most of the answers were yes, but with no statement as to how the public is informed. Many, and just doing this, we could see that many town department personnel actually do provide reasonable modifications or accommodations informally, such as making house calls to someone who's homebound, or moving meetings to accessible locations. So that's that's good, and we actually do provide a sample of a public notice in attachment E in your final report. ADA grievance procedure. The town of Berlin's already adopted one as required under the ADA, and it was effective August 2019. So there's an ADA section on the town website that contains the policy. It's recommended that the Board of Selectmen page also have a direct link to the ADA page. So, and that procedure is actually posted as attachment B. Policies, practices, procedures. This, it's our recommendation to, have at the bottom of each job description, the town of Berlin is an equal opportunity affirmative action employer. We assure you that your opportunity for employment with the town will be based solely on your merit without regard to race, religion, sex, national origin, or disability. So, so that is a, that's a recommendation there. The trying to think what else do I got here. One really great example of a policy that Berlin does have comes from the Berlin Public Library. This could also be a good example of what they do for accommodations, but I won't go into their policy, but it acknowledges that the library is not fully accessible, but what's not accessible for people, the library staff will make every effort to get the materials to the people that request it. Reasonable accommodations, that pretty much the backbone of what the ADA is about. one method does not, work for everybody, whether or not they have a disability. So, making an accommodation is something that's, within the realm of being able to do. So, there are, at the end of some of the job descriptions that we looked at, like the town accountant, administrative secretary, part-time custodian, library assistant, a couple of different library assistants, and the library director. There's a sentence that states reasonable accommodations may be made to enable individuals with disabilities to perform essential functions. Although ADA does not require an employer to have job descriptions, they can be used as evidence of the essential functions of the job. So a recommendation that we make is, in addition to the example on some of the job descriptions, consider this. The town of Berlin is an equal opportunity affirmative action employer. We ensure you that your opportunity will be based only on your merit without regard to race, religion, sex, national origin, or disability. So in other words, just have them both throughout. Maintenance. And just some examples of reasonable accommodations that I came across. From accounting, we do whatever within reason is needed to get requests met, and that is that makes sense because that's what the reasonable means. Council on Aging, no formal process. We will address specific requests as they arise, which that's great. Conservation, no policy, but anyone can just ask us. And then in the library self-eval, there was informal. We do deliver materials to homebound persons when requested. Town clerk says, yes, tell me or email the issue or the problem. And the police chief, no formal process. Accommodations have been made at the time of participation. Then maintenance, the accessible features of any physical property is important. And overall, the town of Berlin did pretty well. I mean, we only came across a handful of items such as bathroom stall doors that are no longer self-closing, entry/exit doors with excessive operating forces, missing elements such as signage. So, deteriorating sidewalks. Unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast. I'm sure the highway folks can speak to that. And accumulation of debris in the base of the curb ramps. Effective communication, auxiliary aids and services. The based on what was submitted in the surveys, as well as viewing policies and available materials, it's not really clear as to what degree the town complies with this provision. It does not appear as though there are assistive listening devices available at town meetings. As of writing this report, I never got a definitive answer if there were assistive listening devices available. And if it's something that the town wants to look into, Center for Living and Working actually has a department that assist people who are deaf and hard of hearing. And they have, multiple catalogs of devices that could be, purchased by the town if, if you're interested. So, otherwise, the only places the only place where it was noted was that the police chief stated that TTY services are available through its dispatch center. And when we did our when we surveyed the library itself, I could see that they had materials in MP3, books on CD, and large print. And also, the library is part of the CWMA's digital catalog network, which has a lot of accessibility features in itself. Website accessibility. The town uses Civic Plus for their government, for their website, and that seems to work pretty well. I just happen to have friends of mine with visual impairments that use JAWS, and I asked them to take a look at your website, and they said they were able to navigate pretty well throughout the site. So that's a good thing. Polling places, when Jim and I were surveying the municipal center, the voting poll was being set up for voting on the next day. I believe that was Super Tuesday. So everything was set up, and we were able to take a look in there without touching anything, and saw that the Automark voter assist terminal was placed where it ensures the user's privacy from other people there voting. The only concern that I noted was that a poll worker table was located almost immediately behind the Automark screen. So maybe move the poll workers table, a little more away from the Automark machine. But overall, the town of Berlin does pretty well in accommodations and accessibility. There's, no red flags. And I think, this ADA plan will really be a nice augmentation to, something good that's already started. So that's it for my my report. If anyone has questions, they're welcome to ask now, or you can ask after Jim speaks about the transition plans.
Hey, thank you very much, Mike and Jim and Connor, for that introduction to the plan. I'll start. I'm sure others might have questions too, but there's a
Margaret, we still have to do the transition plan piece.
Oh gosh, okay.
Okay.
Well,
Sorry.
do you want me to do questions on this piece now?
I think all at the end. I think all at the end. Will be
Okay.
fine.
Okay. I'll save my questions.
Okay. And I hope you don't hear my big dogs barking upstairs and interfering with this. I got two Great Pyrenees, and I'm down in my basement office. They're upstairs, and somebody's walking by or something because they're barking like crazy. So, okay. So a couple of things before we get into this. So by having this plan in place, this will afford you federal compliance, and it will afford you potential protection from any legal proceedings and the federal side that may arise, as long as you're working towards the implementation. So again, the intent of the plan is identify things in non-compliance and move forward over a period of time as you can afford to do so. And we've been, I think Mike with the CLW hat and other plans that I've worked on, that's been the case where there's been an issue, someone has filed a complaint at the federal level, but because they had a plan in place working towards compliance, it afforded them for further legal action. So it also allows you access to state and federal funds, both at the Mass Office of Disability, which you received this grant for, but now for construction, for DHCD monies and any other under the CDBG side, and any other federal monies that might be available for construction. Now, I didn't mention before at the onset, the 2010 ADA standards and 521 CMR in Massachusetts, there are differences between the two. Some are subtle, some are not so subtle. The 2010 standards made a big change in reach range. So if you had built something back 5, 6, and our plan identifies what's the most current standard. But I'll get back to that in a second. So for example, the reach range under 521 CMR is typically 54 inches. So you have a coat hook and a bathroom stall. By 2010 ADA, it's 48 inches. So technically you're not in compliance if you look at a 521 CMR. There's also some areas where one standard, federal might be silent, state is not, and vice versa. We have to look at what is the most, stricter of the two. In general, the ADA standards provides much more specificity on, what's required. Now, there are some things to consider. There are, as you know, at the 1870 townhouse, there are historical considerations and variances that are allowed, but you have to go through the process. There also is a safe harbor. So again, if you had constructed something back in whenever it was. So the ADA, there were standards in effect in 1990. There are standards through 2008, some changes and some language, mostly on what was included as disabled or services. And then there were standards again in 2010, which came effect in 2012. So if you did some construction maybe in 2005, you'd be under the safe harbor rule for the old standards. Regardless, we still went with what the current standard is for your purpose, what's applicable. There's also tolerances. So depending upon a certain height range.
Excuse me, Jim, can you get a little closer to the mic, please? Thank you.
Yeah, there's also tolerances. So if within a certain range of heights, if you're off by a certain bit, that's allowable. So let's say, let's see if I can have it here. Okay, so if you are, if the dimension height is more than 36 inches, let's say the requirement is 48 inch for each range, and you're at 47 and a quarter, you're within acceptable tolerance for that reach range. Tolerances do not apply to slopes. They do not apply to if you have a range. So you see in the report, and I'll go through generally, for example, a grab bar in a toilet room, toilet stall, must be 33 to 36 inches above finished floor to the top of the gripping surface. That's your tolerance. So if you're 36 1/4 inches, it's too high, you gotta lower it. If you're 32 and 3/4 inches, you're too low, you gotta raise it. So there's no tolerance when you have that range. So those are, some of the things which are very specific, more on the ADA side and to some degree on 521 CMR as well. So, I'll go through generally stuff in the buildings. I'm gonna look over there to the book as I read through.
Jim, excuse me, Jim, you're breaking up again.
All right, let me see if I can, hold on
I
a
think
second here.
it just happens when you're talking to the side. If you talk right into the screen.
Unfortunately, I got my book to the side, which I'm looking at, so let me. I'm thinking in general, and some of the things highlights, and then some of the things are common areas. So one of the things on the municipal office building, which also you have your fire and police in there. So there were some issues with the parking, in terms of the striping and whatnot, and the widths. Also, the signs themselves were too low. Under 520 CMR, they has to be at least 60 inches above finished floor to the bottom of the sign. So it's and that's 5 feet, and then can be no more than 8 feet to the top of the side. So some were in that range. So your signs were generally too low. by, a few inches to as much as 10.5 inches. There were some problems with the accessible route to the building. As you get up and approach, you had excessive cross slopes. You can't have more than a 2% cross slope. That also applies to sidewalks. And you can't have more than a 5% running slope unless you want to install railings. Because then you're allowed up to 8.3%. So you're up in that 6.4% range. Trust me, you don't want to install railings. That's $135 a lineal foot, two sides, so it's $270 lineal foot times whatever the length is, and it's very expensive. You're best off to try to reconstruct with the concrete. Concrete's a lot cheaper than those galvanized paired railings for a ramp. Like those areas, you're in this building, and this commonality, Mike mentioned it, is under maintenance. Your door operating forces are either too great, and the closing speeds are too quick. In one case, actually, I mentioned the reach range earlier on. You have that airphone to buzz in, which I believe also triggers your police department. That's 7 inches too high under ADA. So that really should be lowered, because if you're in a chair, then that's outside the reach range. Again, it's a lot of little things, signage, for hardware, stair railings, just not anything major, just a lot of little things. And it's all detailed out in report. There were a number of things in the bathrooms, and again, a lot of it pertained to the heights, reach range, whether it be dispensers, whether it be light switches. Also, the grab bars was an issue outside that range. Again, stall doors which are not fully self-closing, and also stall doors, and this pertained in other areas of town. So both ADA and 520 CMR require that you have to have pull devices on both sides of the doors. Most folks only put them on the jurisdictions that we go to, they put them on the outside of the door. Well, if your door closer is not working, how are you going to shut the door? You got to reach down, try to blow and grab the door and pull it in. You have to have pull devices on both sides of the door. So, municipal office building, those are some of the general things. A police station, same approach area would be an issue. There were some, protruding objects in some of the hallway areas. A protruding object is, if anything is more than 4 inches on the sidewall into the accessible route at a height of 27 inches and 80 inches. If I'm sight impaired, my cane is not going to pick up detection on the item. So you might have something that's 50 inches high and protrudes out like 7 inches, like a defibrillator. And I'm going to walk into that and, probably bruise, or could, cut my shoulder or my arm or something. So we have recommendations, it's either simple relocation, maybe not so simple, or a fixed object, which is more simple, placed under that item. So now my cane will pick up detection under that. So most commonly in defibrillators, we would say rather relocate defibrillator, relocate like a fire extinguisher or an alarm. You put that fixed object underneath there. It could be a wastebasket. It could be a small little plant stand. It could be something where my cane will now pick up that so I don't bump into that on the way out. That also applies, and I don't think in your case headroom was an issue in any of the buildings, but it also applies to headroom. So a lot of cases, if you have a staircase coming down and now it goes down to about 60 inches and I'm walking and there's nothing, I'm going to walk into that and bump my head on that staircase coming down. So you want some kind of obstruction there. But again, that didn't apply at all, I don't think, in your case. On your 1870 building, you did apply, there were a lot of variances that were applied for. There were still some things that needed to be addressed. Parking was one. Again, you get some of the maintenance things, the door operating forces and the door closing speeds. Still some areas needed signage. Some protruding objects in there as well. I think some fire extinguishers and some emergency lights by the bathroom. So again, that same concept of something put below them. The things to highlight, though, there were 2 variances which were applied for and received, but they still have not been addressed. One had to do with additional railing.
Excuse me, Jim,
Yes?
we can't catch what you're saying when you turn your head.
Okay, there were two variances that there were actually 7 variances that were, 2 were applied for, and it seems they have not yet been addressed. One is some stair railings. I think it's next to 4, lower level. There's only a railing on one side. And then there was some east side egress stairs. There was issues then on the railings being non-compliant. And in the variance request was stated that the town was going to address those egress stairs. They don't have extension. I think there's some height issues as well and that sort of thing. So that's specified in the report. You can see specifically, what that is. Oh, the Berlin Library. Bob, sorry. A lot of issues on this, as you already know. So, unfortunately, I mean, there's some parking issues, signage, the levelness in this parking. But one of the things is the exterior ramp, which I think is relatively new, maybe in the past 10 years or so. There are issues with that. The concrete ramp leading up to the actual truck ramp has very excessive cross slopes. That's an issue because obviously you're in a wheelchair. If it's slippery or whatever, then you're going to have a chance to kind of slide off a bit on that. And the truck ramp itself has major issues on the running slopes. The running slopes are very excessive, up to 10%. 8.3% is the maximum for a running slope on a ramp. So, those are issues on the approach. Same thing with other buildings, door hardware, door signage, that sort of thing. So another item under both ADA and 520 CMR is having adequate knee clearance, especially if you're in a wheelchair, at least 27 inches. That's critical for a library because you're going to go and you're going to get books and you're going to sit at a desk or a table. So there are a couple areas which didn't have the actual required knee clearance. Some simple solutions rather than just simply block them up, whatever the required inch. I think in this case here, we needed a couple inches to get to the required minimum. So to block those tables accordingly. Obviously, the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues here is there's no accessible route. There's no accessible route to the lower level of children's area. There is staircases wholly non-compliant, both in terms of the treads, the steepness, even the width of the stairwell. And there's no accessible route of travel to the outside area. Again, under both ADA and 520 and CMR, if there's any services offered to individuals, it must be offered to all. So if you have an area, obviously downstairs of the library, but an outside area with this picnic table and there's a group area for functions, activities, and that, then there needs to be an accessible route to those activities. Doesn't have to be pavement. It could be stone dust as long as it's maintained. It meets the clear width requirements and that sort of thing, the levelness, and then no abrupt change of the level surface. So the big key on those, if you decide to put in any of the locations, a stone dust compacted accessible route, maintenance is a key. And that, that I'm sure with DPW highway, that's probably the last thing that they want to be responsible for doing. But stone dust is a cheap alternative, but it's in a long term, it's very time consuming to maintain. Highway, some of the same things, doors, parking, signage, shooting objects, reach range. There are some bath issues as well. Dispensers too high. Some of the setbacks, the grab bars. I'm noting here metered faucets. So in anywhere you have metered faucets, this is one of them. Metered faucets, self-metered faucets must stay open for a minimum of 10 seconds. So it's, that's going back in. This is kind of a maintenance thing. Making sure even that if you're pushing on them, the operating force no more than 5 pounds, and that when they are put into force, and they stay open for at least 10 seconds. Not going to comment on the bullet house transportation. They're pretty straightforward. We did a summary on the bullet house because really it's in construction and process now. So parking and recreation facilities, and again, really looking at the South Commons area. So one of the issue, obviously, the issue there is accessible routes, and also playgrounds. So under both 521 CMR and ADA standards, there must be an accessible route again to all areas, which others have access to. within a playground area, it must be all around the play area itself, 2 within the play area, and 2 the play components. So there are actual different, and we have these in here. We referenced there are different ASTM standards. So there's different types of surfaces that are in those areas. Wood chips, whether it be plain wood chips or rubberized wood chips, are not an acceptable alternative. You could have an accessible route. It could be stone dust. It could be asphalt around and to the play facilities. Then there needs to be a different alternative material, which has certain retention and bounce retention, and it's called your fall zone around the play equipment itself. And then the other areas where it's not the accessible route or the fall zone, those could be wood chips or rubberized or rubberized. You're in the same boat as probably 99.9% of every municipality across the Commonwealth is wood chips or rubberized chips. And so that's just something that we had pointed out. I think in speaking to, there was a young man doing the mowing, and we asked him, if there were portable toilets that were put out there during, when it was in use during, regular season use, and he said, yes, they were. So we put in there that if you do have a portable toilet or toilets, 1, they must be on an accessible road travel, must be on a firm level surface, and 2, more importantly, almost every community that we've been in, it's probably been 30 or so, municipalities, jurisdictions they provide accessible toilets, but they're not ADA compliant toilets. So, and we have examples here in the report. An ADA compliant toilet complies with all the standards required for accessible user stall, which means you have your running radius, you have your setbacks from the side, near wall, far wall, your grab bar heights are compliant, your reach range compliant, your door operating mechanisms compliant, the closing speed, all of that. Most of your accessible toilets that vendors provide do not meet the ADA and 521 CMR standards. So if you specify in the future for a portable accessible toilet, be very clear, and it must be ADA and 521 CMR compliant. So again, on the top comments, again, the route travel, none really throughout the whole area. It's just simply just ground. Gazebo is not accessible. So again, there needs to be required accessible routes of travel to all areas. That would mean, any kind of player seating, gazebo, and all those different areas, bleacher areas. I think you had a concession stand there, I believe. It looked like that's what it was. The building was locked. Again, the concession stand window needs to be at a certain height, no more than 34 inches high and 36 inches wide. It was much higher than that. So those are all detailed in the report. We then looked at your sidewalks and curb ramps, and we kind of focused around the down, your common area and that sort of thing. And, there was a lot of issues, the curb ramps themselves, no level landing or narrow over level landing, just the condition of the sidewalks themselves with gullies, deterioration, or excessive cross slope. Lots of times you'll see and the case was here as well, on driveways where you're trying to make that transition coming out of the driveway to the street, and homeowners want to make sure that, that's they've got that angle smoothly. Unfortunately, that cross slope is probably about 8, 9, 10%. So you really got to make it level. Now the vehicles bottom out. So now you're going to deal with the homeowner complaining, my car's bottoming out. But that's typically what happens. But that's a design issue, and when those have to be redone. A lot of areas didn't have detectable warning strips, which are required. And I believe in a couple areas, they just either terminate at a granite curbing, your crosswalks at a granite curbing, or just on grass. Again, if you have a crosswalk, then it needs to have a curb ramp and needs to have a level landing. It can't just terminate at, no man's land. But again, you're in the same boat that many communities are across the Commonwealth. So it's just something that you build into your plan, and over time, as cost reasonable, you address that as part of your capital plan, and you chip away and make things so they're more accessible. So in general, that's kind of the report. We have it all detailed in here, and we have the citations. You can go to the state regulations under 521. You can go under 2010 ADA standards. It's there. You can go to see exactly what it is. We also provided in your program section of Sidewalks, and we looked at both. We provide information on both the ADAG regs, 521, and ProReg. So you have all those citations together and what the stricter standard was, and that, I think will be helpful for your highway super in the future. You can just use that as a guide to say, okay, well, when I make these renovations or someone else is doing them, you double check before you acceptance of those sidewalk programs to make sure they comply with those standards. So that's it, pretty much in a nutshell.
Wow. Wow. Thank you very much. Before we, anybody wants to ask questions, I just want to say that this video, along with the entire ADA self-assessment and transition plan and the executive summary, will be posted on the town's website, so folks can take a look at the materials that you've discussed this morning. I just have a couple of things, and then if anybody else has questions. Clearly, this is outlining some work for the town. I think it's actually a good thing because the town has adopted a complete streets plan. We're looking at various infrastructure projects that are badly needed, and to be able to tie this in is going to be helpful. First of all, on the acceptance of Chapter 40, Section 8J, it doesn't appear that the town ever accepted that. Is that required to be able to apply for any ADA grant funding in the future?
Under the MOD program currently, it's not required, but I think it would be required for you to set up the Commission on Disabilities. Is that correct, Mike?
That's what the statute provides for the Commission on Disability. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And for the board members, that's a local option statute, so that's something that would have to be approved by town meeting. So it's something we can think about moving forward.
Yep.
And the other thing is, this is just a comment, we actually have an HR study that's going on simultaneous with this. And so part of that is updating job descriptions so we can be sure that that employer statement is part of those job descriptions when it's done. So thank you for that input. We can incorporate that as well. Could
I interrupt for 1 second, Margaret? So
Sure.
Along with that, I think we had some sample language and have your HR person look at that. So, and this is more for protection on your end. So if you've got a position, which it's a desk job. And and that person, it's 99, it's all a desk job. So if I could be in a wheelchair, I could apply for that job. So some of the language that typically is in there, stand or walk or retreat, whatever. So there's language which, again, and I could be, disabled and I need maybe a walker or whatever it is, and I don't get that job. And I'm saying, well, look at the job says I need to walk so much. Well, that could be something where I could go back and say, listen, you discriminated because you have to walk. So language like traverse, and other things, and detect. That's another for vision, for detect, traverse. We have a number of different types of language to use, words, phrases, and that's in this section on accommodation. So if you have your person look at that and make sure if there's any language that could be viewed as discriminatory, look what we provided, make the replacement, and if not, do a thesaurus search, find a better word in your thesaurus and include that as well. Okay, all right. I will pass along that information to her in her work. Right. Does anybody else have any questions? We've got about 5 minutes to allow for any questions. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Chief?
I have a couple. Just a couple is, first, I think as we start looking at the list and things that need to be corrected, as we start to knock off some of that, I kind of ended up with other questions. So obviously one of the things, and I think we talked about it when you guys did your walkthrough and other things, was the protruding objects in our hallways.
Yep.
my question is, those are hand sanitizer dispensers. I think the easiest would be to move them into offices, get them out of the way. I don't really want to do that with COVID. So we would put something up underneath them, some type of fixed object.
Yeah.
But you have to look at what height those dispensers are set at.
So the dispensers should be at least 48 inches above finished floor, which I believe they were.
Yeah. Is there a maximum?
Well, actually, yeah, well, no more. 48 would be the max.
48. All right. So 48 is where we want
That's
to
on
be.
the, that's on the ADA. Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Excellent.
I think retrain is 18 to 48. You don't want 18,
No.
but 48 would work. And you can even put, I mean, something simple. I don't know what you did. A little piece of plexiglass like that, and then with some angle irons, and just below it for stain detection, a small bit. You
Yeah.
could do that easily, and that would pick up stain detection, be compliant.
Okay. And then the other thing is, there's some issues with the parking lot and a van spot and things like that. So we're actually in the process of working on a project to redo the parking lot.
Okay, good.
We met yesterday. We talked about some of the things, the ramp, the entryway. But as we look at the number of spots, accessible spots, so obviously we have a few now. We'd add a van spot. Are there more that would be needed under the law, or are we covered with the number of spots we have?
So I can't recall. I don't think all your spaces were striped in the parking lot. Non-accessible were not striped. Correct?
No, they are. Yeah. No,
They're
they
all
are.
striped?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you could email to or Margaret, get the number of total spaces that you have in the parking lot, and then we can advise you in terms of how many spaces you would need. I think you were okay. I'm pretty sure. Typically we do that. We do a count, but just to make sure. And if there was an inadequate number of spaces, you could adjust that in the report. But from memory, that you were fine on that. But if you just could do that, just we'll double check. And then how many spaces you would need.
Okay. And then, so part of that, we have spaces that are kind of set off that are just used by the firefighters. Just used, they're not in a public area of the parking lot. So would we be subject, should we count those spots as well, or should we leave those spots out?
So I would provide a list of all the spaces, the reserved, non-public spaces, and then your public spaces, including the ADA spaces.
Okay.
Because I think you had 2 there, I believe. So,
Okay.
And now we just quickly look. Yeah, it's just simple looking at the table, and yeah, and it all depends on how many you would need, and then at least one would be van accessible. If there's only one, it would be van accessible. If there's 2, then one should be van accessible. You can have a shared access aisle, and so it all, might not be as bad as you think.
Okay. Excellent. No, we just wanted to make sure that as we're doing it, we make sure that it's set up correctly.
Sure.
See anything about number of spots in the report. So.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Actually, Chief, if I can remember, correctly, when we were there doing the surveys, I believe the parking lots were probably in need of restriping anyways.
Yes.
In other words, they were very,
More than that.
they were very faded. So that might have made it difficult to do a real space count. And,
Okay.
And typically, if when it comes to doing counts, different areas of that complex, that building is big enough to be like a complex. It's almost multiple parking lots.
Okay.
So you would, so each parking lot would be subject to like the 1 in 25, rule that's pretty much prevalent in both the ADA and the 521 CMR.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments for the consultants? Lisa?
Just a quick question, talking about parking. We have a parking lot, that it's the handicap parking lot. There are no spaces marked. Do they need to be marked? And it's a gravel parking lot.
Lisa is the 1870 Town Hall manager, by the way.
Yeah. So you're talking about your building up at 1870 Town Hall?
Yes.
Yeah, that was noted in the report as being non-compliant, that it needs to be paved. That's not a compliant surface, no. Needs to be paved, needs to be striped. That's it. Hard surface, so if it could be stone dust compacted as long as it's maintained on a regular basis, so it meets its standards. So what happens over time with stone dust, if it's not maintained, it gets rutted. Maybe some of the stones protrude up, and it's no longer firm, hard, stable, and slip resistant. Because if those stones start to collect, now it's a slip with those stones. So stone dust is very hard, not hard. Yeah, well, hard, time consuming to maintain. It's
Right.
actually over long-term cheaper just to have it paved and have that with the parking space, access aisle, and approach into the building. I think the variance actually, if I recall, and it could be wrong, I think the variance specified a paved parking area, but I would have to double check.
Thank you.
Okay, that's interesting. Anybody else have any, Lisa, do you have another question or are you?
No.
Okay. All right, anybody else have any questions? Yes, Mary.
The windows we just installed since the time of their inspection are probably too high to be compliant, I'm guessing. Did you note the windows that we just installed for COVID in each of the doors to the offices?
So I'll try to elaborate on that. Thank you. So what we had to do, as you know, with buildings reopening for COVID, we were required to put in barriers, protective COVID barriers. So we have several offices, as you know, that don't have counters. People just came in. So what we did under the Coronavirus Relief Fund or the CARES Act was we put in what we're considering temporary measures to be able to protect the public. Mary is showing one of these now. I would agree that it's probably too high under ADA standards because it's in the lowest window and it's got a very small protruding counter, but these are supposed to be temporary measures to address COVID. So that's what Mary's asking about.
Can you just, take that picture and then measure it and just send it to us? Measure the height?
Yeah.
And I think
Okay.
if it's a temporary measure, then that would be, it could be maybe just the one page and just put into the plan, modified. But yeah, just measure the height, the width of the counter, the height of the counter, the height of the window, which should be the same, and then just send that to us. We'll look at it.
Actually, one of the discussions we had with the builder that did the work and everything, that we knew it was too high, but we were looking for a quick fix to open town, to have town offices available.
The hope is the use of these will be temporary during COVID and that once again, someday we'll be able to open our doors and people will be able to come into the offices.
Yeah, but that doesn't look to be, is it 43 inches? It doesn't look to be that, the window, it's more than 43 inches? It is, okay. Yeah, okay. All right. Well, that answers that. Yeah,
All right, Mary,
somebody
can you measure the height, width of the counter and take a picture of it and send it to Jim and
I'll
Mike?
do that. I don't
Okay.
have their address, but I can send it to them. Yep.
Okay.
Also, keep in mind, it's a temporary thing and that the doors can be opened
Yes.
if we have to accommodate. It's not like the doors are not openable.
Is it a
I
temporary
agree.
thing in that we're removing these things?
Yeah.
We're not removing these things.
It's a temporary thing and that doors, the intent is that it's temporary and that the doors will once again be able to be opened.
Yeah. I
And
think it'll be
technically,
okay. I
right
mean,
now,
this-
they can be opened if somebody needs help.
Sure, right. And I think maybe just, and maybe just a little, maybe a little posting, temporary posting next to the temporary windows and temporary counter. So if you need assistance, blah, 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 something like that. So.
Does anybody else have any questions? We're a little bit over now. Does anybody else have any questions? Last call for questions. Let's see. I don't believe we have any other questions. So I want to thank you all again for joining us today and giving us an overview of the self-assessment and transition plan. I think it's going to serve as a very good resource for the town as it moves forward with various projects and the services the town provides. And it's quite a comprehensive plan. So I want to thank you again. And we will be sure to keep that on the front burner so that we can reference it frequently.